The first time someone signed my name, I was convinced it was a glitch. The midnight air in admitting was cold enough to make my knuckles ache, the monitors breathing that soft, mechanical hush that always reminded me of a sleeping animal. The discharge report printed with a tired cough, and there it was, discharged by Eden Vale. I rubbed my thumb over the ink like it could smudge into a more reasonable truth. My badge was on my lanyard, my login still active on my own screen. Somewhere in the belly of St. Gabriel's, a patient had been released into the dark by the person I was supposed to be. The second time someone signed my name, a man's daughter cried at my desk. "You said he could go," she kept saying, mascara feathery under her eyes like wet crows. "You signed it yourself." She showed me a photo on her phone. No face, just a navy scrub sleeve and a wrist with a narrow brown leather bracelet, a hand left slanting an E that hooked sharply backward. I don't write S like that. I do it the way my third-grade teacher taught, round and open like a small bowl. "That's not me," I told her, "the hospital fluorescence turning everything brittle. I promise I would never release your father without you." But the form was a mirror insisting I had. If you work nights, you learn to recognize when silence is listening. The building had that posture now. It crouched. Wind pressed at the old glass up in the atrium, the ocean a few blocks away flossing its teeth against the jetty. I boiled water in the staff microwave and poured it over a teabag as if heat alone could destroy the cheap taste of worry. My name sat on the printout on my desk like a borrowed coat, still warm from someone else's shoulders. "Hey," a voice said, and I looked up to find Noah Rios in the doorway of admitting, security supervisor, night version. He'd worked days for years, I'd heard, but he'd shifted onto our hours a month ago, which felt like a small kindness you didn't know how to accept without wanting to cry. He had the posture of a man who had learned to be gentle the long way around. He lifted his travel mug in a tiny salute. "You look like you saw a ghost." "A ghost who discharges patients," I said. "Twice now." He stepped in and leaned on the counter. Close, he smelled faintly of laundry powder and coffee gone past its best. His eyes were careful, an amber brown that caught light like a library corner. "Tell me." I did, hands wrapped in my cardigan sleeves because my fingers wouldn't stop moving. When I finished, he didn't say "you must have made a mistake," which is the sentence people usually put between you and their fear. He just said, "Show me the logs." The third-floor server closet hummed its indifferent hymn, while Russo from IT coaxed the computer into coughing up door swipes and timestamps. Russo was small and swift. One of those men who seemed to eat vending machine food, not because he had to, but because he respected what it had survived. He had a violet gel pen tucked behind his ear, a habit that read as endearingly teacherly until I looked closer at the audit trail and saw the same brand of ink on my forged signature. "Rough night?" Russo said, his eyebrows making their own language. "Someone's cloning my badge," I said. "Or signing with my login," he frowned. "Badge cloning's not easy." "Not impossible," he added quickly, eyes sliding sideways to Noah as if he'd broken a window and wanted credit for how he'd chosen the smallest pane. "But you'd need a skimmer, maybe a minute with her lanyard." Or, he tapped the screen. "See this?" 2 swipes almost simultaneous at different doors. B17 and NICU vestibule. "That's not possible unless..." His mouth made a pondering line. "Unless someone got your credentials and is remote RDPing while a badge opens doors. Or unless I can be in 2 places at once," I said. I tried to say it lightly, but it came out like a cough. In the glow of the monitor, my name looked flat and bright as a warning sign. E-Vale, E-Vale, E-Vale. The E's were all wrong. "Hooked backward, a left-hander's habit. We'll pull cameras," Noah said. He didn't reach for my arm, which made me want him to more than if he had. "We'll fix it." He stayed while Russo navigated through midnight footage. Elevators slicing open and closed like eyelids. A janitor dragging his mop like a slow animal. Doctors moving with that tired grace that never stops being admirable or frightening. Then the person who wasn't me, navy scrubs, hair tucked, a surgical mask. In admitting, you learn to read hands because the rest of the face is a guess. This woman's hands were deft, lefty, a small crescent scar on the top of the thumb. "There," Noah said softly, not triumphant, just certain. "We'll work backward. On my break at 2, I bought a coffee that tasted like burnt rain and went up to NICU the long way because sometimes, in the small hours, I like to stand behind the glass and watch the tiny breaths. Night there held you like someone brave enough to Star-shaped paper clips held notes on the bulletin board, tiny constellations, as if whoever stocked supplies believed in literalness. On a corner of the counter rested a pump bottle of hand sanitizer with a lemon lilac scent I'd never noticed anywhere else in the hospital. I pressed a bit just to make the smell look like coincidence and inhaled. Citrus top note, something softer under. When I stepped back to the glass, a nurse waved to me through it with a friendliness that made me wonder what version of me she recognized. "Hey, Eden," she said when the door hissed open. "Doing admissions for the stars tonight?" Paige wore navy scrubs like everyone else, but managed to make them look like a choice. Her hair was a brown the hospital lights tried their best to punish and failed. A star-shaped clip winked on her lanyard, like she refused to be bullied into blandness. She was small but didn't seem like it. Kindness looked right-sized on her, like it came in petite. Someone had told me in the small, crowded cafeteria gossip way that she and her husband had tried for years and lost 3 times. Someone else had said her husband died the winter the river backed up and took a man who thought he could be old-fashioned to water. You learn a hospital twice, first as a building, then as a storybook. "Just came up to see them," I said. "Everyone's quieter than admitting." "Give it time," she said, her smile tilting to the left the way her handwriting did. "They like to wail for their audience." She held a tiny bundle like it weighed exactly as much as her love. "This one's our safe haven baby. Surrendered last week. She does better with someone humming, like a tiny engine. Want to try?" She read my face quickly and added, "Not tonight, I know, all the rules. But soon, join our cuddler program. You have the hands for it." Hands. It felt suddenly like I had to look at mine to make sure they were mine. "I'd like that," I said, and meant it. She offered me a pump of lemon lilac sanitizer without being bossy about it, and as I rubbed my palms together, she said, "I love your name. Eden Vale. It sounds like a place someone could live when they're tired of being lost." I thought of the DMV line 2 years ago, the way the clerk had said congratulations like a wedding and slid me a temporary ID with the name I'd picked because it felt like a door. I thought of the way you can leave a life if you gather your courage and your papers and decide to map yourself differently. I had been Nora Greer through 26 winters. I had worked at a diner with red stools, loved a man named Caleb who wasn't careful with his anger, collected cards from the therapist who kept mentioning safety plans like they were furniture I could assemble with an Allen key. I had picked Eden because I wanted something that sounded like rest. I had picked Vale because I wanted to honor the valleys as well as the gardens. It was the first thing I had chosen that didn't ask me to apologize afterward. When the call came to admitting, Paige touched my arm as if we were already friends. "Bring those hands back up here soon," she said. "Our little stars need you." Lemon Lilac rode with me down the elevator. I watched the doors close on Paige with that star clip flashing and told myself it was ordinary to like someone quickly at 2 in the morning. Back in admitting, someone had left a sticky note on my keyboard. "Violet ink." The words tilted left. "Stop leaving your name where I can take it." I touched the note and then foolishly lifted it to my nose. The lemon lilac ghost of sanitizer lived in the paper. I threw up a hand in Russo's direction as he passed, a strange tableau of authority in a hoodie. "What do you know about badge skimmers?" I asked, trying to make it sound like flirtation, so it would just be office comedy and not terror. "Dangerous and cool," he said. "Like motorcycles and love." He winked, took in my face. "Also illegal and against policy, Eden. But we both know policy is a suggestion printed in black text. Look, I see the alarms. 2 swipes, same identity, different doors. Somebody's doing something slick. But before you get too murder podcast, tonight we also had the resident who keeps signing the wrong barcodes because he thinks he's smarter than the scanner. A janitor borrowed a nurse's badge to get into an equipment closet because the broom in his closet gives him splinters. And Dr. Kincaid," he stopped himself. "What about Kincaid?" I asked lightly, though the name was already a hard word in my mouth. "Our head of neurology was a tower people liked to mistake for shelter until they tried to lean on it." "You didn't hear it from me." A glance around. "But he's been writing night staff about length of stay. Someone's been rushing discharges to make the counts sing." "So if someone signed my name," I said, "I should be looking at motives other than identity theft." Russo shrugged a little. The gesture in acknowledgement of all the unsolved things that kept him employed. Just saying, the hospital at night's a city you don't know the map of yet. I took the sticky note to Noah. He read it twice, then held it an inch from his nose like smell had turned into evidence. Lemon, he said. And something else. Lilac, I said. From NICU. They have star-shaped paper clips up there, too. The two facts together made me feel like I was cheating at the test, but we had to start somewhere. Paige Arlen? He said, the way you say a name when you're trying not to make it mean something sharp. She's the best person in the hospital, he said, counter-arguing immediately. If she wanted to borrow your name, she'd ask with a cake. Let's not anchor too fast. Myra covered my lunch the other night, I offered. A different anchor I could resist. Myra with her watch that always flashed low battery, and her boyfriend who might have been a cousin. Night gossip is also cartography, and she knew my login because she watched me type it the first week. She jokes about it, but Noah put a hand up, gentle, not shushing, just in respect for the name. We'll keep our eyes open, he said. Meanwhile, change your password. And if anyone calls you from a number you don't know and says your name like they bought it, hang up. At 3 a.m., my phone rang. No caller ID. I considered ignoring it, but night makes you moral. This is Eden, I said, already hating how that sounded like a confirmation. You shouldn't leave a name lying around, a woman's voice said, almost playful, almost sad. Someone might pick it up. Who is this? My voice went professional out of habit. You're calling a hospital line. I know where I'm calling. The line clicked in that tiny way that meant the person's mouth had tilted. You told me once that you wanted a name that felt like a place you could rest. I thought, a soft exhale. I thought I could use it for a while. The wind picked up. A sign rattled somewhere in the hallway like it wanted to be bigger than itself. Who is this? I asked again. Because one method we learn is to repeat simple things until someone meets you at them. Rest well, she said, and ended the call. I did not rest. I paced the ugly green that the administrator who approved this carpet must have believed meant safety. My mind made a parade of suspects. Russo with his violet pens and pretty words about things that are illegal and romantic. Dr. Kincaid with a spreadsheet for a heart, pressing bottom lines into my name. Myra, sweet with the kind of gravity that collapses into what it can hold. A man with a leather bracelet and left-slanted script and a lemon lilac smell that came from NICU and nowhere else. At 4, the hospital inched toward that hour where even the most caffeinated shadows start to consider lying down. Noah walked me to the vending machines, a ritual he had adopted under the guise of coincidence. We ate peanut M&Ms with the hangdog seriousness reserved for grief and fluorescent lighting. You always come when people shake, he said conversationally, as if he were talking to himself and I was allowed to listen. Not just tonight. All the nights. You ask them their mother's name before you ask for insurance. I noticed that. That's because mothers' names don't change, I said, and regretted the shape of the sentence as soon as I heard it. It made me sound like someone who wished things could be simpler than they were and knew they couldn't. I mean, names change, he said simply, reading me like he carried a card laminated with my worst-kept secrets. He was careful not to let the sentence turn into a question. Then he folded the empty candy packet like it was formal. We chase your shadow. We'll set a trap. In what world do I have a shadow? I asked, and he looked at me in a way that made me feel seen with more softness than I was used to surviving. When he'd gone back to his hall rounds, I opened the sticky note drawer to find one star-shaped paperclip resting there like it had decided the drawer could be sky. I pulled it out and stuck it in my pocket with a feeling I told myself was only superstition. The storm rolled in late, as if the night had decided to stay up too. Glass trembled. The old building made small animal noises. You only hear when the wind remembers it knows your address. In the camera room, the monitors ran like a slow river. At 2:19 a.m., the moment the first forged discharge had happened 2 nights ago, the vestibule to NICU opened to a woman in navy scrubs with a chaplain badge. Chaplain? I said to Russo. Grace Lee is chaplain tonight, he said promptly. But she's off. Family funeral. She wrote it in the calendar. I only know because she included instructions on how to water her plant. He tapped keys. Key control shows a chaplain badge checked in the lockbox, but more tapping. No sign in the access log that it was removed. So our not me is using chaplain credentials, Noah said slowly. And your name. Someone who knows the soft spots. Someone who knows which closets don't trip alarms when you sleep in them. Someone who knows the safe haven baby is most vulnerable because no one will call her mother. You're thinking the baby, I said. Not money, not data. Not discharges. You think she's using my name to get to her? Think, he said. With me. He didn't say we could be wrong because he understood the difference between caution and disbelief. The midpoint is where stories change their questions. Hours later, sitting on the nasty carpet with my back against a cabinet that held the good bandages, I realized mine had. I wasn't asking who was stealing my name. I was asking what they wanted with the small girl who didn't have one yet. We made a plan with the lack of ceremony you employ when you do not want to give the fear its own chair. Noah would post a guard outside NICU who looked like he was sleeping. Russo would kill the elevator camera on the second floor for 8 minutes exactly, the way a magician shows you the hands, not to lie, but to ask you to believe lying is different when it saves something. I would continue as ever to be me until someone who wasn't me mistook me for their reflection. Between 3 and 4, admitting took a breath. A man came in with a fishhook in his thumb and apologized to the plant by the door for getting blood near it. A woman who'd bitten her tongue on a tooth that never stopped growing promised the nurse she'd never say something unkind about anyone as long as the anesthetic worked this time. Dr. Kincaid swept past, the air shivering behind him like a small town bowing to its mayor. "Ms. Vale," he said without slowing, the use of Ms. both correct and insulting in a way I had learned to catalog. "If we could keep the discharge numbers from stalling at night, my service would appreciate it." "Someone's been signing my name," I said in a tone I worried sounded like I was petitioning a city council. "We're working on it." "Then work faster," he said, the words crisp enough to make you aware of your posture. He carried a canvas bag with a hospital logo, small milk containers clinking inside. When the call came, it wasn't a call at all. It was a sticky note on my screen, in the same leftward violet tilt. The E hooked back like a fish caught on its own curve. "I see you seeing me. Chapel in 5 if you want your name to be yours." "Don't go alone," Noah said, reading it over my shoulder. "Ever." "Come then," I said, and the phrase felt like an offer larger than its literal contents. The chapel sat at the far back of the first floor, tucked behind radiology like a secret that had been misplaced and then honored. The door clicked open to the lemon lilac ghost that had wandered from NICU to here like a pilgrim. Candles and battery votives pretended not to be electricity with admirable sincerity. In the front pew, a small man in 3 sweaters and a coat too light for the weather sat bent over a Bible the size of a sandwich. Soul, the security report called him, the city's gentle apostle of lost and found, who had once returned a wallet with $32 in it and asked if the bill could be given to the vending machine because he still owed it from a week he couldn't remember. "Hi, Soul," I said softly, the way you speak at the end of a prayer and the beginning of a friendship. "You seen anyone?" "The Star Lady," he said, pleased with himself because he had remembered a title. He held up something, a star-shaped paperclip. "She dropped her sky." "Good man," Noah said. A hand on Soul's shoulder that was both thanks and apology that we kept seeing him here like this. The chapel door sighed again, and a woman slipped in, breathless, her hands standing out against the dark like she'd been outside and the cold hated her. "Myra from admissions." She saw us, smiled, then saw the sticky note in my hand and faltered. "I was coming to find you," she said to me. "Kincaid wants your numbers. And they're doing another sweep for missing badges, so keep your neck warm, honey." She brushed my arm with the back of her hand, a nervous habit. Her nails were bitten to small, obedient moons. She had a faint lemon smell that had nothing to do with NICU, and everything to do with the scent machine in her car. She'd told me last week it was the cheapest one. I watched her left hand while she talked, the way you watch a suspect because you hate knowing you're learning how. Right-handed, I told myself. The violet pen she lifted from her pocket had blue ink this time. Noted. Fair play. Don't force clues to be bigger just because you're scared. By the time the chapel quieted again, the person we were not had not shown. The note had been a dare or a kindness or both. I folded it, slid it into my pocket with the star-shaped paperclip. When we stepped back into the hallway, the radios went off like birds. "Code Pink," someone's voice said, flat with training, jagged with reality. Infant abduction protocol. NICU. Noah ran like a man who had learned to pace himself and decided to fail at that for exactly once. I followed, the hallway narrowing like a throat. Outside NICU, the security guard who had been stationed, young, soft mustache, already a man whose heart broke when he did things right, stood with his guilt in his hands. "I pretended to sleep," he said, voice shaking. "Like you said, but I really did for a second." Then she was wearing a chaplain badge and had a form with your name, Ms. Vale. She said the mom had called. She knew the code. She knew it all. Doors? Noah asked, all efficiency with a layer of mercy. A stairwell, the guard said. Down toward the chapel. Of course. Of course. We followed the breadcrumbs we'd dropped ourselves. The camera in elevator 2 was dead as planned. The stairwell smelled like lemon lilac and fear. At the bottom, the vestibule camera held a still of a woman's forearm as she pushed a door, the small crescent scar above the thumb a dark comma in pale skin. The baby was layered into a blanket, tiny, unalarmed, the world still a secure thing because she had not yet woken to its trouble. We turned left. We followed the smell. Left-handed Ez in violet ink pointed the way down the hall where the chaplain's closet, repurposed 1,000 times and never changed on any official map, held spare robes, a blanket warmer, a file box of grief pamphlets that used language so gentle you could bruise your eyes on it. Inside, breathing hard as if she had run in a dream, Paige stood with the baby tucked against her heart and looked at me like we had rehearsed a scene and she'd forgotten her lines. Paige, I said, and the name unfurled inside my mouth like a different kind of prayer. In the moment between my breath and Noah's, I took in what I needed to be honest to later. The lemon lilac on her hands, the star-shaped clip on her lanyard, the leftward slant of the handwritten Grace tag she had made for herself, the small crescent scar on her thumb that matched the woman in the camera. I had moved through the hospital all night collecting clues like I was picking fruit, and here suddenly was the tree. Fair play is when the reveal feels kind and inevitable and still makes your heart kick like it's surprised. She didn't look like a villain. She looked like a woman whose arms were finally doing the thing they were made to do and who had discovered too late that the world had rules sharper than she was. She cries when I leave, she said, the sentence direct enough to be a confession, soft enough to be a lullaby. I only ever meant to hold her. I've done this since I started nights. Sometimes the parents can't come. Sometimes there aren't parents. I thought your name sounded like a place babies would love. Paige, Noah said, and I heard everything in the way he said it. The rules he loved, the grief he hated, the long year he had given to this building like an apology to his brother. This can't be the way. She won't go into the system, Paige said, fierce and quiet, like someone telling a story she had well rehearsed in her head and found still too tender. My sister has been waiting. They have a crib. They have wallpaper with stars that glow and then dim so she'll learn that night can be gentle. If I fill out the form and sign it right, if I bring her to the back elevator at 4, if I don't get recorded... She blinked, saw the camera on the ceiling, and shook her head at her own naive hope. I know, it's wrong. But right has been so cruel, Eden. You don't understand what they told me when... She couldn't say a month. She said winter the way you say war. Love is a decision about what to do with what you know. Noah stepped toward her, not bold, not timid, a man wanting to change the end of a story and aware of his own hands. You used her name, he said, nodding toward me as if I were present for my own girlhood. You used a chaplain badge. You're planning to what? Drive her to your sister's house? Hide her under your coat until the world forgives you? He lifted both palms as if they could hold both women in the room. We can fix parts of this. We can't fix it all. But it doesn't have to break you. Paige pressed her lips to the baby's hat, a kiss that was reverent and practical all at once. The baby sighed and sank deeper into whatever sleep sounds like when it doesn't have a memory to fight with. I took the night shift because that's when no one asked your reasons, she said. I took your name because it felt borrowed from a good place. I know I shouldn't have. I know. Her eyes went to Noah and then to me, and then to the door as if we could be 3 points of a compass. Give her to me, I said, my voice a shape I had not heard before. And come with us to NICU. Tell them. We'll stand there while you tell them. They'll fire me, she said. They'll press charges. They might, Noah said honest. Or they might put you on leave and let you sit in the room while they do the 1,000-yard discussion about what to call mercy when it's messy. But if you go now, if you take her in a storm and try to hand her to someone outside the process, it will be a story you can't carry. She looked like someone dividing herself into parts for inspection. She looked like someone who had practiced being brave and hadn't realized practicing isn't the same as doing it in front of witnesses. She let me take the baby. Her breath, I whispered. because it was such a small, perfect version of the word. She smells like sleep. We call her Nova, Paige said, halfway crying, halfway laughing at herself. I know we're not supposed to. I like to think of her as a star that started over. Names. I had changed mine and believed I could be new. Now a woman had borrowed mine because she believed new could be shared. It felt like the building had arranged these facts on the table and said, "Here, make something gentle out of this." The walk back to NICU took 15 seconds and my whole life. Noah radioed ahead. The nurse at the desk looked from the baby to me to Paige to Noah and made a decision older than policy. She reached out and took the baby back into the room. Her arm sure. "What happens now?" Paige said to no one and to us both. "Now," Noah said, "we tell the truth, and we make sure the truth is big enough to hold the whole night." HR woke up fast for scandal. Mr. Barris, our CFO, arrived rumpled in an expensive way and looked at me like my name had become the most costly item on his spreadsheets. Dr. Kincaid, drawn by the electric scent of policy and distress, stood with his arms narrowed across his chest and said, "Unacceptable," as if it were a spell against human frailty. Russo lingered behind, making himself small and for once saying nothing funny. Grace Lee, the chaplain, FaceTimed in from a dark room with a plant in the corner that looked well-watered and said, "Paige, sweetheart," into the camera with a voice that made Solomon himself take off 2 of his sweaters in penance. I learned how quickly a life can tilt. Security took my badge not because I had done the wrong thing, but because my name had. "Suspended pending investigation," the woman from HR said, a line she probably wore as makeup. Paige's badge went too. Her body made a sound you only hear when someone is very tired and very determined to stand up anyway. "We'll review charges," Mr. Barris said to her, to me, to Noah in a way that suggested everyone's job is a political party. "This sort of thing cannot—" "Stop a second," Noah said, and the room actually did. "We have a safe haven infant. We have a nurse with a history of loss who holds babies at night when no one else is there to. We have a forged signature and a borrowed name. We have a chaplain's closet being used as a closet because no one wants to raise money for pain. We have a building full of staff who patch holes because they love the story, not the budget. I am not excusing anything. I am saying, let's name it right. All of it," Dr. Kincaid arched a brow. "And what do you call it, Mr. Rios? Your moral clarity is duly noted." "Call it what it is," Noah said. Desperation braided with devotion. Sloppy mercy. A mess we can clean by making better mess prevention. "Put her on leave." "Put me on leave if you need a scalp to wave. But don't call the police and pretend that means safety." Everyone looked at me then, which felt unfair and also correct. I didn't have authority. I had origin.
"She took my name," I said, and the room listened harder because this was the title of whatever was happening.
That wasn't right. But names are stories. We borrow them and share them and change them, and sometimes they save us. If you need to take mine from me to make the computer feel better, fine. But if you do, take the whole story with it. My name used to be Nora Greer. I changed it because I needed a place to rest. I'm not sorry for that. I'm tired of hiding it because I think it makes other people feel safer. I am Eden Vale because I decided to be. I'm Nora because a girl lived and made choices and deserving didn't come into it. If you want my badge, take both names. And then maybe let me keep the part where I can hold a baby when her mother can't." Noah looked at me like the floor he stood on had decided to become sky, and he had to learn how to walk differently. Grace Lee cried softly in her distant square. Russo bit his lip because he understood code, and this was a language too. Mr. Barris did math with his mouth and then realized math wasn't invited to this part. They put me on leave anyway. They took my badge and said it would be a week, maybe 2. The police came and took notes and went away with friendly, firm faces, the kind people have when they're trying to forgive you for having a crisis while they're awake. Paige went home with her pockets empty and her hands aching the way hands do after they've held something heavier than themselves. The safe haven baby slept without, carrying what paint the law would use to draw a crib. Around her, I had always thought the dark night of the soul was a metaphor people loved because it made their grief sound like a book. It turned out to be literal, too. The storm kicked the city around like a person late to an appointment it didn't want to attend. At home, my apartment made that humming noise it does when it is lonely and pretending it's fine. I put water on the stove not because I wanted tea, but because the sound of boiling is sometimes better than silence. My phone lit up with texts, then a DM from an account with no picture, then a voicemail. When I played it, the voice made every hair on my arms stand. "Nora," it said. "I saw the news." Silence that had nothing to do with poor reception. We need to talk. Caleb, of course. I had left him by changing my name, which is a violent mercy when you think about it long enough. I had told myself he wouldn't find me, because I believed leaving makes you a person the world doesn't file under the right letter. But news spreads. Stories find their own mouth. I sat on the kitchen floor because sometimes chairs feel like ambition. I texted Noah because he had asked me to in exactly these words. Please let me be the person you text when you are afraid. He responded so quickly the screen felt warmer. 5 minutes later, he was at my door with a jacket that carried rain like a blessing and pan, Dulce in a paper bag because he believed in the small kindnesses that keep you from falling all the way into your own gravity. Someone wrote Nora on my mailbox this afternoon, I said, the sentence tasting like a betrayal and a relief. I painted it out with whiteout. I don't know what that means. It means the world knows a thing it shouldn't, and our job is to choose what to do with that knowledge, he said calmly. He had the way of speaking some people have when they've already forgiven you for what you're about to confess. I didn't tell you, I said, because I didn't want the part of me that was a story you solved to be the only part of me you see. He stretched out his hand between us, not grabbing for anything, just making space like an offertory plate. Thank you for telling me now, he said. You deserve to be seen as a person you made, not just the person the world tried to make you be. And he smiled with one corner of his mouth, something shy and teenage in a man who had learned to be careful. I like both names. I like all your names. I like the way you say coffee like you're scolding it. I like the way you tap the desk when you're keeping time with your heart. I laughed then, soft and stupid and grateful. Do you like the way I attract chaos? He looked at the bag of bread as if it could offer counsel. Chaos makes me feel useful, he said. But I like you without it too. Trust tested and then given back is a kind of sacrament. We ate bread and talked about nothing for 20 minutes, which in grief time is a decade. When my phone pinged again, it was Noah's radio. The hospital had gone to partial lockdown. There had been an attempt at the helipad, someone trying to get access without clearance, someone small and quick, someone with a chaplain's badge. I have to go, he said, already moving. He paused. Do you want to come? It's a bad idea, but it might be a worse idea to sit here and think. The helipad sits on the roof like a coin you forgot in the sun. When we reached the stairwell door, wind pried at the seam like a burglar. The city performed below us, the bridge's headlights doing their slow parade, the ocean calling names I never learned. On the far edge of the pad, a figure stood with arms around her middle, as if she had tried to make herself larger by hugging harder. Paige. Beside her, a man with a baseball cap. Too clean, to be honest, looked at his phone. The blanket in Paige's arms was a yellow that refused sadness. She saw us and shook her head like a dog shaking rain, her mouth shaping nothing, everything. The man took a step back. This is ridiculous, he said, mild as oatmeal and twice as dangerous. We're family. You're not cleared, Noah said, his posture a pragmatic prayer. There are processes. I work for an adoption agency, the man said, the sentence accurate as a suit. The family is approved. We're expediting. Paige looked at me over the blanket like we were girls in a house where the parents had started yelling downstairs. I thought, she said. I didn't think. I thought. Both. You thought love would read as competence, I said, and that systems would forgive you if your plan honored affection. They don't. They forgive signatures and those only sometimes. I turned to the man. You're not leaving with her. This isn't your decision, he said, bored. Who are you? I took my own hands then, the way a person takes a step across a gap that isn't wide if you decide not to be afraid of falling. I'm the person whose name you've been misusing, I said. I am Eden Vale. I am also Nora Greer, because sometimes those facts both matter, and you will not use either to take a baby off this roof. Noah stood with his radio not to his mouth, and to his mouth both, like a man very aware that talking changes outcomes, and so does listening. He looked at me with pride and caution like two parents who had decided to share a head for 5 minutes. Paige, he said, the wind editing his voice into something biblical. Please. She shook her head so small it was almost like a tremor. I can't lose her twice, she whispered, and the words hurt to hear because they were unfair and exactly right. I can't walk away and come back and pretend that's something my heart can do. You don't have to, I said, the decision arriving in my mouth like it had taken forever to travel, and then demanded to be urgent. I reached up and unhooked my lanyard from my neck, an empty gesture because HR had taken the badge, but rituals are about belief. Take my name, I said to her, absurd and completely accurate. Take the part of it that lets you stand in that room and say, I did wrong and I'll help fix it, and doesn't make them call you a criminal. I will stand next to you and say, I saw her tell the truth. I will tell them my old name because I'm done hiding behind newness if it helps you. I will spend my capital on you because knights teach you economy, but you can't take her. Not like this. She made the small sound hearts make when they want to break elegantly, and then consider trying sturdiness as a hobby. She handed me the baby. She let me carry this small, named, unnamed breath back through the door, down the hall, into the elevator we had killed and resurrected and killed again. She walked beside me like someone who had decided to be the part of the story that isn't the mistake. Mr. Barris arrived in his expensive rumple. Dr. Kincaid said unacceptable again like he was paid per syllable. Grace Lee came in person, her plant probably thirsty, and stood with Paige and held her small shaking hands while we told a room full of tired people the whole unsatisfying truth. The adoption facilitator man left after someone with a better badge than any of ours waved a paper with seals on it. The safe haven baby remained. The rules did what they could and then stood down in the face of something like mercy. In the fair play reveal that I think lives between 70 and 85% of a story, we laid out what had been in front of us all along. The lemon lilac sanitizer only NICU stocked, migrating on someone's hands to places it didn't logically belong. The star-shaped clips that had winked on our way to the chapel and fallen from a lanyard in a stairwell and made the drawer in admissions feel like it was pretending to be sky. The leftward slant of a hand trained by a teacher who was left-handed herself and had told a room of children their S could hook the other way. The small scar on a thumb from a glass that broke in a house where the battery in the smoke detector had cried low for a month. The chaplain badge borrowed from a lockbox that had a chip in it. Anyone who emptied the trash in that office would notice, and anyone who stayed too late in a building would memorize. The way people call NICU babies stars, because it makes them feel like they belong to a celestial story instead of to an underfunded floor. The way a name can sound like rest and become a permission you never meant to extend. We put the pieces on the table and said, here, it was Paige. It was also us. We billed these nights together. They put her on leave. They did not press charges. They brought in a social worker who was not new and did not archive things in her face. She helped Paige apply to be a foster parent through the fast track that exists for staff when the world is trying to prove it can learn. They patched the chaplain badge lockbox with the money that had probably been earmarked for a lobby plant. They hired a security guard for NICU who had a baby of his own at home and hummed without knowing he was doing it. Noah stood beside me when the committee said I could come back in a week if I took a class on identity safety and apologized to the spreadsheet. I did both because ritual matters. Caleb texted twice and then stopped. Whether he stopped because he decided to be kind or because he got bored with my invisibility, I can't say. But my mailbox didn't grow any more unwanted names. Maybe I had simply become less delicious to people who like to chew on others. Maybe telling the truth turned my skin into something saltier, and the world moved on to sweeter prey. The night shift went on being the night shift. People kept arriving with their emergencies and their quiet wants. Dr. Kincaid kept barking and saving lives, which is a moral math I am still learning how to count. Russo switched to black pens for a while, then forgot and went back to violet because men like him are comforted by same. Solomon came to the chapel with 2 sweaters instead of 3 and gave me a paper star clip every time I passed him, which made me want to stop every time. I went back to NICU on my first night cleared. The baby who people had called Nova until she was named by a court order, and a family who would love her regardless of paperwork, slept like an impeccable liar. Paige, back on the floor with a lanyard that had no clips, looked up from a chart and met my eyes with a gratitude that did not try to be graceful. The foster training is shorter than they say, she whispered when I stood close enough for honesty. Grace gave me a list. And a plant, she laughed. Blue wallpaper with stars that dim and glow would be permitted, they said. I asked. I wanted it official. I took a breath that felt like the end of winter. I pressed a pump of lemon lilac and waited while it dried on my hands, the smell of a place where night keeps trying to be soft. I asked if I could hold the baby, and when Paige nodded, I took her. She was small and inevitable. I hummed without meaning to. Noah watched through the glass and didn't pretend he hadn't. Later, at the end of a shift that had made room for both birth and the kind of paperwork that tries to be mercy, we sat on the loading dock with cups of coffee that had been replaced by tea because we were trying to be new in small ways. Dawn made the brick blush. "You gave up a lot," Noah said quietly. "Names, privacy. I spent them," I said. "Other people spend money. I had this instead." He nodded like I had put it in words he could store. "If I kiss you right now," he asked, "does that turn us into a problem we have to fill out a form about?" "I can handle forms," I said, and then neither of us were talking. It was the kind of kiss that knows the difference between rescue and respect. It didn't make promises on our behalf. It placed a small good object on the table and then stood back to let it breathe. Dawn put its hands in our hair. The building behind us sighed like it had been awake too long and was trying to learn how to sleep with hope. People talk about happily ever after like a place on a map. I don't know if that's what we found. I do know that the name on my badge means something I chose, and the name in my mouth means something I kept, and the man who kissed me on the loading dock knows both and held my hand anyway. I do know that when I clock in now, at the hour where the city decides who it will forgive and who it will forget, the system pings and I say my name into the screen, and it answers like it knows me. I do know a baby who was a star and then a nova, and then something new went home to a room with safe wallpaper and a plant that will live if watered. I do know Paige's laughter sounds like a person who decided to break and then did not. I do know Grace taught us all the difference between rules and wisdom with a small metal key and a larger one shaped like a story. I took the night shift, and someone took my name. In the end, I took it back, but not the way I thought. I took it back by holding it out and letting someone else borrow the part that meant mercy. I took it back by writing it down with the E round and open the way I learned in 3rd grade. A small bowl, something to put good in.